Procrastination is often misunderstood as laziness. When tasks are delayed repeatedly, people assume the problem is a lack of discipline or motivation. However, procrastination usually has very little to do with laziness. In many cases, the people who procrastinate the most care deeply about their work. The real issue is not effort, it is how the task is being approached. What procrastination really is. Procrastination laziness. Procrastination is better understood as a form of emotional avoidance. When a task feels overwhelming, uncertain, or mentally demanding, the brain naturally tries to delay the discomfort associated with starting it. This reaction happens quickly, and often without conscious awareness. Difficult tasks frequently trigger emotions such as stress, frustration, or fear of doing something incorrectly. In response, the brain looks for an easier alternative that provides immediate relief. Activities such as scrolling through a phone, organizing small tasks, or switching to something simpler temporarily remove the discomfort of starting the difficult task. For a short period of time, this creates a sense of relief. The problem is that this relief reinforces the habit of avoidance. Each time a task is delayed, the brain learns that escaping the discomfort is possible. Over time, this pattern strengthens procrastination because the brain begins associating the task with stress and the distraction with relief. Why the brain resists starting. Avoidance of discomfort. Several common triggers increase the likelihood of procrastination. Large tasks often feel overwhelming because the starting point is unclear. When a task does not have a clear first step, the brain struggles to decide how to begin. Uncertainty creates hesitation, and hesitation often leads to delay. Perfectionism can also increase procrastination. When the expectation is that the work must be done perfectly, starting becomes psychologically difficult because mistakes feel unacceptable. The brain interprets this pressure as risk, and avoidance becomes the safer option. In many situations, the task itself is not the problem. The problem is that the brain perceives the task as difficult to start. When the starting barrier is high, procrastination becomes more likely. Once you understand that procrastination is caused by resistance rather than laziness, the solution becomes much clearer. The goal is not to force motivation, but to reduce the resistance that makes starting difficult. When tasks feel too big, one of the most common reasons people procrastinate is that the task in front of them feels too large or undefined. When a task appears overwhelming, the brain struggles to identify a clear starting point. Instead of seeing a manageable action, it sees a long and uncertain process. This uncertainty increases mental resistance because the effort required feels unpredictable. For example, a task such as writing a report or studying for an exam may appear simple on the surface, but the mind interprets it as a series of unknown steps. The brain responds by delaying action until the path forward feels clearer. Unfortunately, waiting rarely reduces that uncertainty. In many cases, it increases stress because the task continues to grow in the background. Reducing this resistance begins with redefining the task itself. Instead of approaching work as a large objective, it becomes easier to start when the task is divided into small, specific actions. When the first step is clear and manageable, the brain no longer perceives the task as overwhelming. Step 1. Shrink the task. Make tasks small. Breaking a task into smaller pieces lowers the psychological barrier to starting. Rather than committing to completing an entire project, the focus shifts to completing the first small action. For example, instead of planning to write an entire essay, the first step might simply be outlining the main idea or writing the opening paragraph. This approach works because the brain reacts differently to small commitments. A task that requires only a few minutes feels manageable, which reduces resistance and increases the likelihood of beginning. Once the task has started, momentum often builds naturally because the hardest part of any difficult activity is the initial step. Step 2. Lower the starting barrier. Just start. Another effective strategy is lowering the expectation for how long you need to work. Many people believe they must commit to long periods of productivity before starting a task. This assumption creates pressure that makes beginning more difficult. Instead, allowing yourself to work for only a few minutes can remove that pressure. When the commitment is small, starting becomes easier because the task no longer feels demanding. In many cases, once the work has begun, it becomes easier to continue. The brain shifts from avoidance to engagement, and progress begins to build. Once tasks become easier to start, the next step is removing the distractions and mental habits that pull attention away from work. Step 3. Remove distractions. Even when a task is small and manageable, procrastination can still occur if distractions remain easily accessible. The brain naturally looks for activities that provide immediate reward with minimal effort. Phones, social media, and unrelated tasks create quick escapes whenever the work becomes slightly uncomfortable. Because of this, the environment plays a significant role in productivity. When distractions are removed or placed out of reach, the brain has fewer opportunities to escape the task. This does not require extreme measures. Simple changes such as placing the phone in another room, closing unnecessary tabs, or working in a quiet environment can significantly improve focus. When distractions are reduced, the brain gradually learns that continuing the task is easier than abandoning it. Step 4. Focus on progress, not perfection. Progress greater than perfection. Perfectionism is another common cause of procrastination. When the expectation is that work must be done perfectly from the beginning, the pressure associated with starting increases. The brain begins to treat the task as a risk rather than an opportunity for progress. Shifting attention from perfect results to steady progress reduces this pressure. Instead of focusing on producing flawless work immediately, the goal becomes moving forward step by step. Early versions of work do not need to be perfect. They simply need to exist. Once progress begins, refinement becomes easier because there is something concrete to improve. This change in mindset removes much of the fear associated with starting. When progress is the goal, mistakes become part of the process rather than something to avoid. Step 5. Build momentum. Momentum plays an important role in reducing procrastination. Each completed action reinforces the idea that effort leads to progress. Even small achievements signal to the brain that the task is manageable and worth continuing. As these small completions accumulate, resistance gradually decreases. Work begins to feel less intimidating because the brain now associates it with forward movement rather than discomfort. Over time, this momentum transforms productivity from a struggle into a habit. Overcoming procrastination is rarely about forcing yourself to work harder. Instead, it involves changing how tasks are structured. Break large tasks into small steps so they feel manageable. Lower the barrier to starting by committing to short periods of work. Remove distractions so attention remains on the task. Focus on progress rather than perfection. And allow small completions to build momentum over time. When resistance decreases, starting becomes easier. Once starting becomes easier, procrastination begins to disappear. What are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for the latest videos.